Hello and welcome to Education Scotland's The Pedagogy podcast. I'm your host, Bex Ewart, and I will be leading us through some really interesting conversations around about pedagogy with a really wide and broad spectrum of educational professionals, children and young people. This podcast came about as a response to the OECD report, which found that in order to improve the quality of outcomes for our children, practitioners and teachers need to be supported to explore their own pedagogy and their practice through a pedagogical lens. Unsurprisingly, in the early years, it's been a focus, and so there's a lot of research and policy documents and research papers around about the subject of pedagogy. But as we move through the school stages and into secondary school and further education, that reference to pedagogy drops off. We'll be talking to a whole host of educational professionals from the early years through primary, young children and people from various different stages in their education, and then right into further education, exploring pedagogy, what it means to different people, and what we might change and what we might challenge ourselves around to ensure that our education meets the needs of our children and young people as we move into an exciting but unknown future. Okay, hi and welcome to this episode of Education Scotland's The Pedagogy podcast. I'm here with Marnie Ferguson from Westfield Primary and Torphichen, is that right? Yes, great. And we're going to talk about her schools and the shifts that she has made across those. So Marnie, could you give us a little bit of background as to how you find yourself in this current position and where your thinking's come from and gone to?
Okay, so I've been head teacher here for 3 years, but I've taught across these two schools my entire career. So I came to Torphichen as a probationer 17 years ago, and then found myself going across the two schools and took over as head teacher 3 years ago. The curriculum journey that we're on, when I started as head teacher, I was doing into headship. We focused on skills. That was where it all began, how to ensure that our curriculum is more skills based. But then in the midst of all of that, COVID hit, and we found ourselves in a lockdown where we tried to shoehorn the way that we used to do school into a format that just wasn't possible. And that was our catalyst for change. So we started to think, well, how do we need to do school differently to make sure that it's fit for purpose? Mm-hmm. And that meant by the time the second lockdown came, we had really started to shift our thinking. West Lothian's message was, don't go back to how you did it before.
Yep.
And we took them to their word and we really started to explore. So we looked inwards, first of all, at what are the main issues for our young people. We have two schools from very different communities. Mm-hmm. We were trying to look at, we needed to make sure that any changes we were making were relevant for both.
Yeah.
Here at Westfield, there's quite a lot of rural poverty, and for a lot of our young people, school was already not relevant when it was adult-led, and we decided what was happening when it was happening. But at Torphichen, they were very compliant, but actually when we looked at the skills needed, they were too compliant, they didn't question anything. So for very different reasons, we realised that a significant shift was going to be meaningful and purposeful. We then read a lot. So there was an awful lot of reading about what are the thinking behind how we can make school relevant. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of talk about relevant for the future, but actually it's for now, because COVID told us that it's not about the future, it's about now.
Yeah.
So we did collectively a lot of reading around that. We started to connect with schools locally, nationally, globally. And we made a lot of really exciting connections, key ones being Agora in the Netherlands, mm-hmm. XP in Doncaster, High Tech High. We connected with Agile Classrooms in Florida, the Learning Alliance in Iowa. So we just really looked way beyond where we had looked before. And I think through that we started to create a model, picking and choosing from elements we thought that would work. And that was where our curriculum innovation began.
Wow. So quite the international influences.
Definitely.
Great. So through that then, as you've talked about curriculum innovation, what does the term pedagogy mean to you, and how does it fit within the thinking that you've done around about shifting what you're doing?
So I think, our thoughts on pedagogy were very much about our role in leading the children, but very much about teaching almost, and the climate that you create around that. But there was one thing that I read that was called His Pedagogy Had Its Day.
Okay.
And it talks about pedagogy, and when we heard about that, we were like, aha, that's what we're thinking about. And that's very much about it being self-directed learning, and that our role as teachers was no longer enough, and that we would have to consider this pedagogy where it was, if it's the child's self-directed journey and we are there to facilitate that, then our role has to be at times the pedagogue, the teacher, but also it has to be the coach, the mentor, the networker, the facilitator. So I think that was the biggest shift for us, was seeing that our role would have to significantly change if we were going to get it right for our children, for now and for the future.
That's a big shift in thinking.
It is a big shift.
So, because typically for us as teachers, our professional identity kind of situates around leading, making those decisions, planning. So how did you support your team in kind of moving with you and shifting their thinking towards that?
Just little by little. I actually started with a box. We connected with Hidden Giants, and they started to get us to really think about our whys. Why do you do what you do? Making that, we knew that everybody had come into this role to make a difference and to get right for young people. So we were starting from a shared determination. And then it was little by little, there was a lot of discussion around our whys and our thinking. And it started with one practitioner here at Westfield being brave enough to have a random item in a box. It was my daughter, because when Steph, our principal teacher, and I were thinking what would we put in the box, we were thinking like teachers. Well, if you put that in, then that might happen, that might happen. So really, that's not what's right. So I got my daughter to put something in a box. And Louisa carried it around with her for 3 days. And on the Friday, she had to open it with her class, but have nothing planned. And the learning had to come from what was in the box. And she was nervous, because we do, don't we? We're kind of control freaks.
Yes.
Actually, as teachers. She had no control. I didn't even know what was in the box. My daughter had put I think it was an age 10 birthday badge.
Right.
But she put it in a bin bag because it rattled in the box. So she had a black bin bag and an age 10 birthday badge. And what we saw, once the children actually trusted, because they started off with, what do you think Miss Ferguson wants us to do? And it was, no, there's no agenda. Well, she maybe thinks that. And it took that big shift for, no, there is no agenda from the adult. What would you do with this? And the buzz and the learning and the purposeful learning that came from that blew our minds. And that was the moment we were like, oh my goodness. We plan to the nth degree, but if we leave the learning in the hands of the children, then it explodes. So that started. Again, it was never a directive. It was, if you want to try new things, let's try it. But Louisa's buzz and the buzz from the children made everyone else go, what did you do? What happened? And then it just started to roll like a snowball and gather. And then you couldn't ignore it. It was too big to ignore. And then through that, then it was professional reading, discussion, thinking together, questioning together. People are really generous, and the people that I reached out to came, and they would do talks for our staff, and it really just grew that confidence that it'll be okay. And we keep saying that trust that children want to learn. They learn spectacularly before we step in.
Yeah.
So just leave them. And then, we started with realising the ambition. That was our text from P1 to P7. And we're like, look how strong it is in early years.
Yeah.
And look how we erode that self-direction as it goes forward. And look at how the engagement starts to erode. And that autonomy, that ownership, that belief in themselves erodes, because they're basically saying, is this right? Is this what you wanted? And that shift from, no, you tell us what you need from us and we'll take you on your journey. So it's about individual pathways. Another book that I read that blew my mind, and it was like, that's it, was it's called The End of Average.
Okay.
And I'm going to forget the author, but I'll tell you that later. And that was that real wake-up moment of, when did we stop celebrating the individual and what makes them unique, and when did we start going down this whole path of let's put them in a chart and give them an average, and how actually it's ludicrous. Average doesn't work anywhere, but we use it all the time in schools. And that was another moment of, we need to stop this. We need to look at the individual, take them on their journey, and spot when the window's open for us to step in and be the pedagogue, be the teacher.
Yeah.
But that's only one tiny part of the journey that we take them on.
Wow. So in terms of the practicalities, how does that work for your school day? So, and how do you, because we do still have the statutory obligations of
Yes.
tracking and monitoring and,
Yeah.
and being able to evidence progress over time. So how does that fit with the model that you've developed?
So it's growing, that's the thing too, because obviously with a shift as seismic as this, all the systems underneath we've had to look at and change. So we are on a journey, and this is where we're at just now in the journey. What has developed into that you will see now today is that our teachers plan together, first and foremost. So we have organised it that rather than people having their time off the floor separately, they come together. So they plan together. They plan together around the core, the literacy in the numeracy, because we've protected. We believe firmly that when we get it absolutely right, everything will just be through this approach. But we did try that for 6 weeks. We had 6 weeks of what if all classes were optional but learning wasn't, to see what do children go to and what do they avoid and why is that.
Yeah.
And that was too scary for us all at that point. So the kind of compromise at the moment is there are short, sharp hub times, as we call them, where they're with a core teacher and they're doing their short, sharp literacy numeracy input. But then over and above that, they will have what we call offerings. So once a week for the afternoon, we bring in partners from all over, or it'll be pupils who run offerings, or staff will run offerings. We ask our pupils, what do you want? What's inspired you? What have you? If we've noticed through observation that they're quite keen on this little bit, then we'll try and get an expert in to do an offering. They don't have to go to that. Those are optional, so they sign up for them. If they don't go to that, they're running their own projects. Then we have master classes, so they're a have to, but you can choose. There's always an option of 3 or 4, depending on how many practitioners we have on the floor. And the master classes will come from the curriculum. We have our curriculum design still, where we go here like pockets of outcomes that we need to look at, experiences and outcomes. It might come from that, or it might come from an offering where a group have been so inspired we go, right, let's get more depth in that. Or it might come from projects. Sometimes the projects can be right across the board, so everybody's involved. So a whole different range, and they do have to sign up for those, and those are carefully planned, and that's what staff plan for collectively together. They have projects, which sometimes they're adult-led, and those are the least popular. So we need to really look at, because, what are we doing with our projects? Because the minute we bring in one that we've carefully planned, they go, oh, okay. And then they do get involved in it, but they're so used to driving their own learning that they're not so keen. And then they'll have predominantly their own projects that they take forward. It might be as an individual or as a group. So to let that happen, staff have to have time together.
Yes.
We start off each term with the logistical side of it, right? What's it going to look like? And then they plan together based on observations, reflections, based on evidence that they've gathered from what's come before. And then we have lots of other systems. So one of the connections, we've looked at agile learning because West Lothian, that's something that they suggested, that's the approach. They talk about that as being the foundation. But through that we connected with Agile Classrooms in Florida. John Miller, he came, did a workshop for us, and then we used predominantly his toolkit as a structure for when they're leading their own projects. Yes, they're going to get plenty of space and time to explore, to think. This staff then, that's their, they coach them through that and develop their thinking. But then when it comes to leading a project, that's structured. They have a pitch, then they have to pitch that, and they get feedback, and then they pitch again, and then when they get it's okay, then they start using Kanban boards to plan, and then they have their big questions. They also have here are my tasks. At the end of that task, there should be evidence of progression, that iterative progression. They then have to evidence that on, whether it be on, we use Seesaw a lot to gather evidence of progression and assessment. So there's a lot of structure behind that, and that allows us to gather evidence. Tracking that at the moment is something I've actually got a meeting tonight with BT to see if they can help us create an app, because the way we're doing it is quite clunky. And we think we need to find a more streamlined way to capture all of that and to track that progression. So it's about streamlining it, but we have our coaching minutes, we have all the evidence, we have all the dialogue that the staff are taking forward, we have the agile toolkit observations that are there to support. There's a lot there, but what we definitely need next is a streamlined approach to capture that, to be able to see. But at the heart of it is, we keep saying, no, it has to capture each individual child's journey.
Yeah.
It can't be somebody else's journey or another. It has to be that child's journey that we're capturing, ensuring that there's progression within every element of that. We'd still have our literacy and numeracy trackers that are from West Lothian. They're carefully done, so that core and the health and wellbeing is done through that, but we're ensuring that we track everything and that everything is equally valued.
Wow, that's exciting. So you talked a lot about the different things that have inspired your thinking. Is there one core, if somebody's thinking, right, okay, actually I'm looking to develop my own thinking about this, to start kind of pushing my own comfort zone, where should they start? What's the thing that they should go to first to inspire them thinking?
I think, well, as I say, for me it was a bit of core reading around something that just sparked that initial moment where you think, no, we can't. This is that eureka moment of we absolutely need to go forward. But the other thing that we've constantly gone back to is Education Scotland, the curriculum for excellence is this.
Yes.
It's absolutely this. There's nothing rogue about it. And we keep going back to that and go, my goodness, this is what curriculum for excellence was meant to be about. And actually what I would say is refresh narrative. Look at the refresh narrative. It tells you what we should be doing. So if you look at that and you look at realising the ambition and you go, we have within our Scottish system the core permission that shows you the way, that's where to start. Because when you look at OECD, our curriculum's pioneering. It is. It's phenomenal and it's outstanding. But it has got lost beneath a depth of accountability, control. And it isn't. It should be about each child. And the other thing that we've looked at carefully is the 4 capacities. Again, as we should, because that's at the heart of a curriculum. But it's given each of those 4 capacities equal weight.
Yeah.
It's for too long, I think we have focused on successful learners. No, equal weight. So when we're tracking, when we're monitoring, when we're moderating, when we're looking at our practice, look at all 4 of these and see them as equal. And if we're getting that right, then we're getting it right for our young people. And then the creativity side of it is just look out, just reach out, look beyond, and look beyond what you've seen before. Like now we meet regularly with Rob Houben in Agora. I would say look at his school. It's really like they have no classes, and from the minute they walk in, they don't have to go to anything at all, which is further than we could take it, but it's really inspirational. And I would say we've just had a practitioner go down to XP Academy. There are elements of that, so it's about reaching out and seeing and find you can't lift what's happening anywhere else, but
Absolutely.
You can be inspired by little bits of it and take it forward from there. And that's what I would recommend. And the other part, I suppose, you forget, don't you, because you just live it and breathe it. The other big shift for us was that we teach in silos, and actually in school it's the only place where you are only learning with people of your age. And that was another massive shift for us. We did an awful lot of reading and looking into that and about that need for community, and that tied in so massively after COVID, when suddenly the communities were, you're so isolated. But also I think through this digital world that we live in, you're almost isolated in your space even though you're connecting globally. So the other thing that you'll see is that our learners, early years in P1-2, they're there together, they work together, it's fully play-based. But then we've joined P3-7, so they all learn together.
Wow.
So in the master classes and the offerings and everything that's there, it is P3-7. They learn as a community. And what we've seen is this huge shift in that sense of together, that ethos in the school. It is so positive. There's such a feeling of supporting each other. But we've also seen how that's impacted on our younger learners challenging themselves more, reaching to be like their peers, and then the older learners having to really constantly rethink, because quite often they'll be working with the P3, and that's something that we've seen is fundamental to our approach. That sense of community, that learning from each other together, and not thinking that a P7, P6, P7 have to learn on their own, because if they mix with P3s, it takes the limit off what we've got P3s at the moment talking about circular economy, and they will tell you what it means, and it's because of this project that they're running, and it shows you what they're capable of, that if you stop putting limits, or, well, you're this age, so this is what you're doing.
It's, so reflecting on everything that you've said, it seems like bravery is the thing here, bravery and trust.
Trust is huge. I said, we keep saying that, trust that children want to learn. One of the things that I read early on, I'm not very good at remembering who, but I've got it. But trust that children want to learn. They might not want to learn what you want to teach them, but that's your problem. Yes. And that's what we kept going back to. And what we see is when we let them decide, with carefully scaffolded and coached and questioned, and we've got an amazing set of questions that Rob in the Netherlands, he'd worked with a local university, and they talk about perspectives. Mm-hmm. So it's about, if you're interested in horses, let's really think about that. So it's that deep thinking around what aspect of that interests you or that you want to develop further. So it's not as if you go, I'm interested in horses, up you go. There's a lot of solid and deep learning that goes through that, but it is trusting. And we keep going back to the fact that you look at a baby, mm-hmm. and you look at them learning to walk, learning to talk, they come into nursery, the depth of learning that happens through play, but we erode that agency that they've got, mm-hmm. and then think, well, we actually know best about what you need to learn, but we don't. We just need to trust in taking them on their journey. With our professional, we are professionals, but that our job as the professionals is to watch for the windows to open. So how often did we go, well, they're at this age, they need to know this. Yeah. But actually, no, they need to know it when they see for this thing that I'm really interested in, and then you go, aha, you then step in. That's your teachable moment. We call them your window. That's when you step in. It is much harder work. Yes. Because you cannot just sit and plan at the weekend and come in and go, here's what I'm teaching. You have to be constantly watching, talking, reflecting, thinking, and then taking each child on their journey. So there's a level of skill that you're talking about there in terms mm-hmm. of, I don't know, in my head I've got this vision of sort of pulling all of the different threads together, and the adult's role being in shaping and helping the creation of yes. pulling those things together. So that is hard cognitive work when you're here, but it sounds like actually the flip side of that is that you're not planning for yes. hours and hours outside of school, because exactly. it's co-constructed yes. with your class. Yeah, exactly. And that's what all the staff will say is, the time they spend at weekends or in the evenings is diminished, but they're shattered at the end of the day. But they're also really energised. Yeah. Do you know, the talk, since we've changed, it's about learning. When people are talking and you pass an incidental conversation, it's about learning, or it's about excitement, or it's about sharing. Wait to see what happened this morning. And it's that when you trust and you watch and you give children agency and autonomy, it's those moments, and they're really hard to capture. So it sounds almost anecdotal, but they're incredible. And so my job, and that's the thing that you keep going, how are we capturing this? And it's about, how do you capture the relevant evidence and track through that, mm-hmm. and not focus on the evidence that's easier to capture? Yeah, absolutely. And how do you do that in a meaningful way that tells the story you need it to tell? And that's been a challenge, and it's one that we're still working on. But I would say talk to our learners, and then you go, that's it. Yeah. It's almost those, get it, and that's what it's about. And when you see our young people, especially here at Westfield, where that they don't always see themselves as equals. They're in the small school, they're quite rural. For a lot of our young people, they don't have the same experiences. Mm-hmm. So now that we're bringing the experiences to them, that's part of that expert network that we've built. Nobody gets to leave without going on our expert network board. It's like, hold on a minute, what can you bring to our community? We're quite ruthless with that. But they're blossoming, and they see themselves as equals. And when I watch our children, we had a partnership event where we had 26 businesses, and we were asking them, what can we do for you and what can you do for us? So we're trying to get those meaningful contexts for their projects. And then you see your wee ones wandering around, engaging in conversation with professors from the Robotarium at Heriot-Watt University, and they see themselves as equals in discussion. Those are the moments that you go, that's what it's about. Wow. That empowerment, yeah. That confidence, that self-belief that they've got now that when it was our agenda they didn't have. So
from our conversation, what's the key message that you would give others to inform their own pedagogical practice?
I think to trust in yourself, to trust in the learners that are in front of you, to be a little bit brave. But we often talk about bravery, but then we go back to Curriculum for Excellence, the refresh narrative, and we go, no, it's not bravery, it's doing what Scottish education is meant to be. So it's that, we have permission, it's there. We need to focus on the 4 capacities. So I would say, be creative, trust, but go back, and that gives you that real confidence, I think, that you're not being rogue if you try something really different. You're doing what we need to do at the right time.
Fabulous. So what's next for you then? Are you in the school context, but also for you personally, are you going to start travelling, going to visit all these brilliant places?
If only. No, because I got to go to the Netherlands to a conference there and to go to Agora, so the staff have told me that you've had yours.
Yeah.
So because we've connected through Rob with a school in South Africa and a school in Australia, so our staff are all telling me it's their turn. So
that makes sense.
For us as a school, it's now that we feel that we've got the kind of process in place and it's working, it's the right process. Now we're looking at that real detail, that rigour underneath each one. So what is an offering? What's an excellent offering? What's an excellent masterclass? So it's digging really deep. It is finding a streamlined way to track progression across all the ESNOs and the skills. Of course, we use we spent a lot of time looking at which skills progression would be right for us. Do we create our own? We had started to look at that, and then the meta skills development Scotland, we felt that was the right set of skills. Yes, we have a skills-based curriculum for Excellence is all about skills, but for us at the time we looked at that with the progression that was underneath it, and we thought that married really well with Curriculum for Excellence. So we need a system now that tracks them equally as importantly as it tracks any of these no's.
Yeah. And
in a way that it's meaningful. So that's our biggest next step. That's what's kind of blowing our minds at the moment, was because we've come up with systems that they're not right. That, ensuring that the quality's there at every single step of the way, and then just constantly looking at the experts around us. We work with the local colleges, but we would like that strengthened. We're working with our cluster, the analytical cluster, and now looking at what is our thread that's going to tie us together, and it's going to be skills. The academy, the analytical academy, is looking at big question based. So it's now looking at this on a cluster level together, because there's a lot of pockets of things happening there. So as a school, that's where we're at. For me personally, I just get so excited about what we're doing, and I'm so committed to these wee communities. So it's continuing to find people that can help us strengthen and grow, and us reaching out and helping anybody else who wants to grow, and just keep being inspired. I'm so energised when I read about what other people are doing, and really excited to see that there's that real desire there to make a difference and to do things differently.
Absolutely. So we are accompanying these podcasts with a playlist of inspirational songs, and you have 2 spots on that playlist.
Okay. So that was the hardest bit. I've written it. I wrote 3 down. One of them I thought that's it, but then when I read the lyrics I thought no, because it's not. I would say I Won't Back Down by Tom Petty, because you do at times doubt and have a bit of oh my goodness, and I think we've kept going no we can't be steadfast, so I Won't Back Down. And I'm a huge Bruce Springsteen fan, and I was desperately trying to find one that would fit in, but I thought Born to Run, although the lyrics might not tie in that thing of that's what it's about taking our kids so they can run to the future with confidence. So those would be the 2 that I would put on.
Excellent choices indeed. Marnie, thank you very much. That was ace and really inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you.
Visiting Marnie's school in West Lothian was an absolute joy, and really pushed my idea of what Curriculum for Excellence could be and how we can really hand that learning over to our children and young people. The experience of walking through was seeing all children across the age ranges, fully and completely engaged in their learning. Children were moving independently between different spaces. They were in control of how they completed the aspects of their learning that they were focusing on at that point, and they were able to self-regulate and solve problems in a way that displayed a resilience that I haven't often seen across learners, particularly in primary school. Thinking about the curriculum in that holistic way, and with children able to learn through their motivations and through their interests, really is the embodiment of Curriculum for Excellence for me. Marnie's working incredibly hard at underpinning structures and processes, because those types of high quality experiences and high quality education, it's not about abandoned learning, and it's not about us as adults and educators handing everything over to the children, but it's that idea of us being the guide and the support, and offering children the opportunity to learn through real life context and through their own motivations. It's incredibly powerful and has stayed with me. Part of what's made Marnie and her team's approach so successful is that they have challenged those assumptions that we have held in education for so long. For example, her school doesn't have traditional classrooms, it's vertical learning. The children negotiate the spaces together and support one another where needed. And they have a sense of ownership and a sense of belonging in the setting that, again, is far stronger than a lot of other places that I have had the pleasure of visiting. They have gone to the point now where their learners are invited to in-service days to support staff development, because they are walking the talk of the whole school experience being a negotiated space between all stakeholders. So it goes to show, when you challenge those assumptions, when you challenge the norms, our children and young people will rise to that challenge and repay our trust in them. Please do join in the discussion using the hashtag #ESPedagogyPodcast, and thank you so much for listening. I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.